Hey everybody, Barry here again. Courier just showed up with my parts, so let's open it up and have a look. This is harder than opening up Christmas gifts. What a job. They're cut to different heights. I told them not to worry about the length of it this way because it doesn't matter. I just wanted them squared off. So he put them in the lathe, got them chamfered up the best he could, dealing with, you know, old rusty parts. Oh, he faced off this side too. That's sweet. Yeah, this is gonna work really, really well. I'm not sure if they're gonna fit really well on this side or not. Well, they might work actually. I can probably just weld them inside also. Something to think about. But what a job. That looks really, really good. Nice. When I assembled this, I went ahead and put the pin in just to get the axle depth correct. That way I know that the splines are fully engaged in these gears here, and when I get the limited slip in, it'll be the same. So I went ahead and just laid this in place to see how much more I have to cut off. And by the looks of it, not very much. Maybe a ½ inch total. I think this will actually work really, really well. I'm gonna go ahead and mark this, put a piece of tape on. So, let's just line this up as good as I can. I can see the mark. So this will be where our axle, where the bearing would sit. Oops. And what I need to do is measure from our piece of tape back to the surface where our bearing actually needs to sit, right here. Use a caliper. And what I need to cut off, 0.4 inches, so we're just over 3/8. So that's what I need to cut off the axle tube to have it riding perfectly on here. Now I will do more measurements before I go too far and make a mistake, but about 3/8 is where we need to be. I do have one of the outer axle bearings in stock, so I think I'll go ahead and press that on and then make the plate that I need for the retainer. That way I can measure and cut both sides, because of course both of our axles are the same length when I'll be using the short side Explorer axles. So while I'm waiting for the other one to come off a back order and show up, I can have the ends already done, welded on, forgot about, and when a new bearing comes in, just install it and put it together. I'm not going to be using this diff until the spring anyway, so really it doesn't matter how long it takes me. It's toward the end of February now. I think it's like the 22nd maybe. So I have until the end of May for sure to have this diff done. And I have the other side axle in, and we can see that this one is going to need quite a bit more cut off. Hard to tell exactly how much. And what I'm going to do is just measure from the housing end right here out to the groove where my bearing is going to sit. And we have 0.45. So let's write that down. 0.45. So that's from the housing end here to the groove. So let's measure the depth from this end right here out to the end of the flange. That'll give us an idea. Now I think the bearing is going to stick out a little bit, but it will be very close. So hard to measure with one hand. Yeah, so that'll do it. And it is 1.54. So 1.54 minus 0.450 is 1.09. So we're just under 1 1/16 inches. That's how much we'll have to take off here for the bearing to sit flush on the edge of this cap and be sitting right against the race here where, or the groove here where it has to sit. So we got to cut approximately 1 inch and a bit off this side and approximately 3/8 off of this side. That's so everything will be nice and centered, and we'll be able to put our bearings and retainers in. And then there's a matter of lining up the axles, like, you know, like this, or we don't need it being all off and stuff. There's a lot of moving around there, but I'll see if I can get it lined up the best I can. I have done it before. I'm not a machinist. Can't really afford to send this to a machine shop, so I'll figure out a way to do it on my own. Now, it took me forever to find this part number. This is National 514003, and it's a sealed bearing that the 9-inch normally comes with. And here's your collar that goes on, you know, here and locks the bearing in place. Sometimes people put a tack on these just to make sure that they don't come off. But this is to fit the big bearing forward 9-inch, which is 3.15 inch. And the inside diameter here, I'll measure it just so I don't mess it up, is machined, or is the same size as the machined surface. Let's make sure we got this zeroed out. Now this is a common size that people machine it to, is 1.56 inches. The inside diameter on this is 1.523, so you got 4 thousandths smaller, so I guess that'll just press on over. I'm hoping it won't be too much interference, but so I just wanted to put that out there in case anybody needs this part number. It is difficult to find. It's for like a 1960s Mercury car with a 9-inch. Apparently they had the same size axle shafts. Normally you have to contact Bear's Performance or Summit and get the correct big bearing or small bearing outside diameter to match this shaft. And I couldn't find any OE stuff, like Bronco didn't fit, and the older 9-inch stuff didn't fit, the Chevy stuff didn't fit. But I just went on Google, started measuring, and that's what you need. Now is try to do some measurements to make the plates that are going to retain these bearings in this housing. And to do that, pop that down. Oh, they go almost flush. That's not bad. That definitely guarantees that it's not going to be loose. So that's pretty good there. That'll give us lots of room to have our bolts tightened down and sort of warp the flange down a little bit so it's nice and tight. So what I need to do is make a bracket that will line up with these bolt holes, and the hole will be small enough that it doesn't hit this inner race but tightly holds this outer race, so we can see that only the inner race moves. Something else I have to account for when I'm measuring and making up my stuff is where this caliper bracket is going to sit in relation to the rotors on the axles, because when this was machined up to here, is this going to allow the caliper bracket to sit correctly in relation to the rotor? Am I going to have to put a spacer behind the caliper bracket? Is it going to have to go on this side of the flange? So I do have a little more calculations to do. Just to get some measurements, I grabbed stock rotor, axle, caliper, brackets, all that stuff, and bolted it onto a housing end that I had left over from the Explorer diff. And what I'm going to do is measure the depth from the from the front of this hub where the caliper bracket is to the back of the rotor hub, which is kind of hard to see, but I should be able to get an accurate reading from there. A little bit difficult to see in there, but if I measure on this tab, which is on the outside of our housing end flange here, and to the back side of the rotor that's just in past this flange here a little bit, then I should be able to get the distance from our hub face to the seat of this flange here. So let's zero it out. And on the flange right here, move this in. Now it is a little bit of a tight spot, but here we we have 2.789 inches, which is 2.79, we'll say. This is a little bit crude, but from our groove that's machined into the axle, right here, out to the flange on the outside, is 2.5 inches. From our hub face, which would be this one, to the outer side of our flange, not the rotor, because I didn't account for the thickness of the rotor, to the outside of right here, is 2.78 inches. That is the distance that the caliper bracket is from the face of the hub. So we're off by 1/4 of an inch-ish. But here's where it gets interesting. We can see that the groove of our axle is going to sit on the edge of this inner race, which, if you look, is about 1/4 inch out past our hub flange. So I think, I'm going to do some more math, but I think if I bolt this caliper bracket directly to our flange right here, I won't have to do any adjustments in or out with our caliper brackets. So obviously the machinist who did all this stuff is way smarter than I am. I just like verifying before I go to bolt parts on and it doesn't work. In normal station roll rat rods fashion, I'm not going to go buy parts. I'm going to make them. I think I might have a solution to my issue where the bearing sits like down into this caliper bracket, and that being a small bearing end, because we can see here that obviously this bearing sits down in this housing end, and we can see here that it does not fit down into a small bearing end. So that means that this outer flange here could potentially sit right down on this race. So let's do some measuring. All zeros. So we got 3.15, we'll say. And here we have 3.16, something like that, so I could ground down that other 15 thousandths. And that's at least 1/8 of an inch thick. So it should plant itself right perfectly down on that. And the cool part is I can set the depth just by cutting it deeper or shallower. And I think it's about 1/4 inch that we need. So I think I'll cut it off 1/4 inch down from this here. And then if it doesn't nip the caliper bracket quite enough, I can shave off a little bit more. And this rear end, while cool looking, it's bent really bad. Bad enough that the person actually cut it and then bent it back and then welded it again, which is really cool, but you know. And maybe later on, I'll cut these brackets off and maybe do something with those. This was a ladder bar setup with coilovers, so these coilover brackets are really cool. These brace bars are really cool too. I don't know if I could use those on this rear end here. So we'll come up with a plan for that later on. Let's cut off these ends, see what we got. So it's not completely even the whole way around. It's not a big deal. Our highest spot is 0.2 inches. So just under 1/4, around 3/16 or so. I'm gonna go ahead and cut this one off pretty much right at the weld, just so I can put it on the vise and have something to work with. So I'll go ahead and slice that off. Must be having one of those nights. I have no idea where I put the other housing end. I checked over the time-lapse video, I had it in my hand, can't find it. I have no idea where I put it. I don't know if I put it there in the toolbox, in amongst this. I looked in there, I don't see it. But I'm losing my mind. I really don't like putting stuff down and not knowing where I put it. So I'll spend the next hour looking for that, I guess. I seriously have no idea where it went. I'm losing my mind. It's nowhere. It's nowhere. It isn't from here to over there. It's not on the floor. I just took it off the end of the housing. Blank. Where? Not in there. All I did was picked up the housing, turned it around, cut off the end. Like, where do I put stuff? Well, it is what it is. I'll go ahead and cut this one off, and I'll find it later. So what the plan is, I'm gonna mark a 1/4 inch. I just measured, and the cutoff wheel that I'm using is 0.05 inches. So when I'm done with my 1/4, it'll be 0.2 inches. It'll be golden. We got it cut out. Should be pretty much the right height and all that stuff. So, I gotta take the bolts out. Darn. It won't go flush. It's not a big deal. I'll just take grinder and run it around here a little bit. But we can see that we have it touching perfectly on the race. Not too big, not too small. That was a lot more work than I expected. That caliper bracket is hard. But I got it to go pretty much flush. Probably a little more work and it'll be good. Now I just got to work on getting these bolt holes to line up. Which are not off like crazy, but I'm probably going to have to just nick the corners out of these. And then the bolts will line up fine then. Well, it looks like it's going to work. The race has perfect contact on it. Everything's nice and free. Gotta fill up a gap here a little bit. Maybe grind out some more of the bracket or the housing end or whatever. But it looks like it's going to work perfect. I have no idea how it got here. How does this happen? I have no words. I've got quite the mess going on here. I gotta say, I have no idea how it went from here to there in that bucket. Like, that's 6 feet. How does that happen? Anyway, tomorrow I'm gonna press this bearing onto this shaft. The other one is gonna be in about a week, so I'll get this ready. Get the housing end on it, and then I can measure up this. When that bearing and housing end are on there, measure everything up, cut off tube, weld the housing end on. Then I can take this same axle shaft, drive it in this end, do the same thing, cut it off, get the other housing end welded on, and then when my new axle comes in, I just press the bearing, throw it together. Everything will be peachy. So that's all the work I have for tonight. So I'm gonna go ahead and get this one posted. I'll have it posted, well, tomorrow morning, which is today, I guess, for you. So thanks for watching. Subscribe and like and share, because that all is a big help, and I appreciate it. Thanks, everybody. Have a good night.